Hello, plant lovers and friends. Thank you for joining me here at Hands Dirty, Mind Clean. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do for all things plants, peace, and positivity. Now, let's get right to what you're here for, a beginner's guide to LECA. First of all, let's discuss what these Cocoa Puff looking balls really are. LECA is actually an acronym. It stands for Lightweight Expanded Clay Aggregate. What that actually is, it's a soilless growing medium for plants. It's a semi-hydro, also known as passive-hydro, growing medium and alternative to soil. It literally is baked balls or pellets of clay that expand when soaked in any liquid. Of course, we should be using water here. The benefit of doing that is that it allows the balls to wick the water up to the plant's roots. Alright, so now that you know what LECA is, let's talk about why people like myself love using it. So let's discuss the pros and the cons of using semi-hydro, in particular LECA. So again, this is totally personal choice, but I find it looks great. I just love the look of it, especially in a glass vessel. So for me, that's a big one. Another one that's probably the #1 reason that people switch over to using LECA is that you will have less pests by using LECA. I don't know of any plant parent who hasn't dealt with fungus gnats, and they are probably one of the most super annoying pests you can get. All right, another big one is you have less mess. Most plant parents have spilt soil or spilt a plant at one point, and cleaning it up is not fun. With LECA, if you spill a ball or two, you just pick it up. You don't need a broom, you don't need a vacuum, you just pick it up and drop it back into where it goes. So aside from the initial washing of the LECA, which can be kind of dusty, owning LECA is less messy, of course, unless you spill the whole pot. That is like my nightmare. But I've never had that happen, so I'm good there so far. All right. Again, something that's arguable is it can be used on all plants. People argue this. People will say certain plants, such as a calathea or prayer plant, doesn't do so well in LECA. I personally will say that because I've struggled with that. But there are many people who have had great success with those and various other plants in LECA. So that, it's totally dependent. Another pro is that it's cheaper in the long run. I will cover this in the con section, but it is kind of expensive initially setting everything up. But in the long run, guaranteed, it is cheaper. Those people who love the earth, love Mother Nature, want to use things that are sustainable, don't want to lower your waste, LECA is for you. You don't have to constantly repurchase LECA unless you need more for the many plants that you have, but it's reusable 100%. Whereas with soil, ever so often you're going to have to replace that soil. You're going to have to add different amendments. You're going to have to replace that soil once the nutrients from the soil have been totally depleted. You don't have this problem with LECA. Another bonus for people who are busy with life, who like to travel, is that you can go long periods without having to really attend to your LECA plants. I'm obviously not talking about your initial transition, but once you have transitioned and your plants are growing healthy and well in LECA, you can go long periods without having to water it. This is great for people who like to travel because you can just fill up the reservoir and go. And I think the final pro that I'll talk about today is the fact that LECA allows oxygen to easily get to the roots. The reason that a lot of plants suffer from root rot is because not enough oxygen is getting to the roots. So the space between the LECA pellets or the LECA balls and the space in the expanded clay balls are what's allowing oxygen to get to the roots. This, of course, decreases your chance of having root rot once your plants have water roots or all of the soil is removed. All right, so now let's get to the not so fun things about LECA, some of the cons, some of the reasons that people shy away from utilizing LECA. First of all, there is a higher upfront cost. As you remembered when I talked about the pros, I talked about the fact that it ends up saving you money in the long run. It's just that upfront, the costs are a lot higher. You have to buy a specific type of fertilizer. You have to buy a hydroponic fertilizer. You cannot use the regular fertilizers you were using for your soil. You might have to change the vessels that you have. Some people still choose to use nursery pots. A lot of people prefer to use net pots. I love using net pots. They're so easy. It allows me to use the regular cash pots or cover pots that I already have. And then I also love using glass vases because then I'm easily able to see the roots. I can easily tell when I need to add more water to the reservoir, so that's another thing right there. The initial maintenance is also a tough one. You've probably seen in my other videos where I transferred water propagated cuttings into LECA. That's easy. That's the easy stuff. The tricky part is moving soil plants into LECA. That part is the tricky part. You really have to monitor your plant, make sure you're not suffering root rot, make sure you've gotten all of that soil or as much as soil as possible off of that plant before you move it into water. Another negative is that you have to wash it initially. So remember with the positives, I said that it's not as dirty, except for when you have to first wash your LECA. LECA is very, very dusty, right? It's clay, so naturally it's going to bring a lot of dust with it when you get a new package. So it's pretty important that you rinse, wash, soak your LECA, and that can get a bit dusty. Another thing to think about for people who live in like apartments or you don't have a place where you can go outside and wash your LECA, that is a big con. You should not be washing your LECA in your sink. You do not want clay building up in your pipes. That can cause a lot of plumbing issues. So regardless whether you own your home or are renting, please do not wash your LECA in your sinks. You do not want those kind of problems. Another con of LECA is that mineral deposits happen. It looks like almost like a white fungus or just like this white covering over the LECA. Not aesthetically pleasing. The good thing with that, it's very easy to get rid of it. You literally just need to flush your plant. But in the meantime, it just doesn't look good. No one likes to look at that. Okay? Another thing, if you're not into science and to the fun part, what I think is a fun part of LECA is being a little scientist at home, you're not going to enjoy pH testing. Keep in mind, not everyone pH tests. For the longest time, I didn't, and my plants were just fine. That was my experience. I'm not saying that I recommend people don't pH test, but if you do have to pH test, make sure you get all that stuff correct. That can be a con, unless of course you really, really enjoy that science part of it and feeling like, you know, you're in a little lab there. So those are some of the cons, and of course, the chance of losing your plant, right? If you don't transition properly, you run the risk of losing your plant, damaging your plant, losing a lot of leaves. Nobody wants that. So that's a tricky thing, and I think that's one of the #1 reasons people are really hesitant with LECA. They're scared about the switch. You might notice a lot of people go from small cuttings into LECA, and that's because it's just so much easier to go with water propagated cuttings into LECA. You have pretty much zero chance of messing it up because the plants already have their water roots. Alright, I hope you learned something about the pros and cons of using LECA, and I hope you're even interested in trying it out. And if you are, make sure to check out my next video, part 2 to this one, with information on how to transfer your plants into LECA. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at hands.dirty.mind.clean. Wishing you an abundance of plants, peace, and positivity.